Pennsylvania. Oh, good. Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. As you know, as you just heard, we are recording this program so that it will be available for the future for you to share. It will be available on PMC's website, on our YouTube channel, and I'm hoping that the various speakers will also assist in sharing this distribution with their judicial commissions. So again, thank you all for joining us. This is a really special program for us, and it's really the first of a beginning of a lot of programs about judicial elections. In our Commonwealth, judicial elections occur in odd-numbered years. And we don't really have a great voter turnout or a history of a great voter turnout, and we'd like to change that. So typically it's 20% of our voter registration of our registered voters who turn out, and we'd like your help in getting more registered voters to vote. Judicial elections are important in that judges impact your everyday life. Judges make decisions that, involve your education, your health, voter registration, a lot of different kinds of rights, family law rights, venue decisions, so that these are really impactful and important decisions. So I just want to give a little bit also to let you know that information about judicial elections before we delve into this. They occur every 10 years for an open seat. And they are partisan, right? So in our primary, we will be voting if you're registered. We do not yet have open primaries. So if you're a Republican, you'll be voting for the Republican candidates. And if you're a Democrat, you'll be voting for the Democratic candidates in the primary. And then in the November general, we'll have a partisan election. We will also, in the November general election, have retention elections. Those are meant to be nonpartisan. They are meant to be based on an evaluation of that justice's or judge's performance for the past 10 years as a yes or no vote. PMC is going to hold in the fall a fireside chat with the appellate court judges who are and justices who are up for retention election. But right now we're here to actually discuss the primary in May. Little bit also quickly. If there's a vacancy because it's for some reason a judge maybe resigns or retires because of an age limitation of 75, that appointment could be filled by a gubernatorial appointment. However, it's subject to the advice and consent is the language, but really approval of 2/3 of the members of the Senate, except for justices of the peace. So that's a majority. The only other thing is that you need to know for judges for requirements, and then we'll get to the meat of this matter, is that candidates should be residents of Pennsylvania and the county in which they are running for a period of 1 year before the election and during the continuance of the position. They should be members of the bar of the Pennsylvania Supreme and approved by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. However, I say that because magisterial district judges do not have to be lawyers or members of the bar, but they have to take a class and then pass an exam. And as I mentioned, there's a retirement age of 75. So everybody knows for the appellate court vacancies, we have one superior court vacancy and one Commonwealth court vacancy. But then we have a number of Court of Common Pleas vacancies. So based on the county in which you live, you should make sure you look that up. In Allegheny County, we have 8 vacancies for the Court of Common Pleas. And in Philadelphia, we have 10 vacancies for the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. Okay, I think I've given enough intros, and what you guys are going to say is much more important that to add to and help assist the voters in making their decisions. But also, I would like to welcome Justice Greenspan, who has I'll say the fortunate or experience of having been appointed, having run for election, having run for retention, and then being appointed again. So welcome, Justice Greenspan. And I know you're going to talk to us a little bit about I'll say the code of conduct and the ethics that surround candidates running, but can you just give us a little bit of history about yourself and the various steps along the way of your judicial career?
Yes, happy to do so. The uh, way that I became, got onto the court in the first place is political. I had some very good help with the DA at the time and the mayor at the time. And so that was helpful. And what happened basically was that I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember the KC5. I was actually not of the KC5. They had to run at that time. Became vacancies on the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas, and the five people who were endorsed by the party ran for their seats at that time. I was able to, luckily, get a long 2-year appointment by the governor at that time. And so I didn't actually have to run until 1989. The election for the KC5 occurred in 1987. And the joy of having been appointed was it was good in the sense that I was able to have my name in the paper for being a judge and working on various cases. So I was sort of better known when I had to actually run, and that was helpful. I have a cute story about that. I don't know if you all know or remember the Center City Stalker, but I was the judge in that case, and I happened to sentence him to a very lengthy term just before the primary in 1989. And so then Mayor Rizzo had a radio broadcast, and he said, because of my sentence, we needed more judges like Greenspan. I got more votes than anyone else that was running in that primary that May of 1989. So
And you didn't even have to speak and comment on the case, which you couldn't do anyway. So, right.
correct, exactly. I sentenced him, and that was what it was. I thought a very appropriate sentence, but it was very lengthy. There were 5 cases of assault that he was convicted of. So it made sense. In any event, after that, I was on the court until I had to run in 99 for retention, which I did. And at that time, also, the bar was very, very helpful to the judges. In 89, all of the money collected, they basically collected money from lawyers, the bar did, and then paid our responsibility, the money that we were responsible for, to the party. They
And
did that for the endorsed candidates.
and so, but there was a process for that, there was an agreement that then the
Yes.
judges wouldn't go to lawyers to ask for
That
funds. And so also that's part of, like, why, what are the restrictions or issues, right, with judges campaigning?
Right. Well, there are many, but by and large, the Rules of Professional Responsibility 8.2b requires that a lawyer who is a candidate has to comply with the Code of Judicial Conduct. And the code says a lot about what you can and cannot do, but it's very specific. By and large, you can't engage in political or campaign activity inconsistent with the independence, integrity, or impartiality of the judiciary. Canon 4 is the canon that of the Code of Judicial Conduct that covers candidates and for judicial office. And they require that you set up campaign committees. Candidates cannot personally solicit or accept campaign contributions except through campaign committees. You can't make any statement that might compromise the fairness of a matter pending in any court. You can't make promises or commitments related to future adjudicative duties. And so that it gets tricky because you're still running for election. So, for example, when I was asked when I was campaigning, so to speak, what do you think about capital punishment? My response, it was hard because I would be dealing with capital cases. And so what I would say basically was, look, I'm not a fan of capital punishment, but I am a fan of the law. And so I follow the law. And I think something like that is a doable way to handle difficulty of not being able to actually say what you believe or what your opinions are. You actually can give your position or opinion on things, but it can't be anything that might compromise any adjudicative process in the future. So it gets a little tricky. So those are canons 4.1 and 4.2 essentially, and then 4.3 allows you to seek endorsements, and 4.4 speaks to your campaign committee and how that works. But you have to, unfortunately, as a candidate, read that canon 4 pretty carefully and abide by it.
And so because of these canons, it's actually hard for voters to get to know the candidates. So fortunately, we have guest speakers, panelists here, who are leaders of each of their bar associations' judicial commission to help us with this process. So we have Mark Zucker here, who is chair of the Philadelphia Bar Association's Judicial Commission, Brian Catanzarite, who is chair of the Allegheny County Bar Association's Judicial Commission, and Charles Eppolito, who is chair of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Judicial Commission. So I'm hoping that you could each, at least to begin with, introduce yourselves, explain which commission you chair, who's on your commission, and like how those commission members are chosen, what are their terms, and what's the purpose of the commission. So Charles, I'm going to ask you to start since you're the parent, the Pennsylvania Bar Association, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Debbie. And first, thank you for asking me to participate in this worthwhile panel. And thank you for the work that you do, and PMC for the work that it does, the very important work. So as mentioned, I'm Charles or Chuck Eppolito. I am chair of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Judicial Evaluation Commission. The purpose of the PBA's Judicial Evaluation Commission is to provide the voting public throughout Pennsylvania with objective evaluations and information about judicial and attorney candidates for election to judicial office, and of judges eligible for retention at the appellate court level, which is the Supreme, the Superior, and the Commonwealth courts. The Pennsylvania Judicial Evaluation Commission consists of 18 members statewide, no more of 12 of whom are lawyers, and at least 6 of whom are non-lawyers. The members are appointed by the president of the Pennsylvania Bar Association. Initial appointment is for 1 3-year term, and members are eligible to be reappointed for 1 additional 3-year term. About a third of the commission is either appointed or reappointed every year. Close attention is given to diversity of every type: gender, race, geography, practice, party affiliation, among others. And it is nonpartisan.
Debbie, you're muted.
You're muted, Deb.
Okay, Brian, do you want to address the Allegheny County Bar Association, because it's a little different?
It is a little different. Thank you. My name is Brian Catanzarite. I am the outgoing chair of the Allegheny County Bar Association's Judiciary Committee. Our committee is made up of 33 attorneys who are voted in. It's one class of 11 attorneys each year. You serve a 3-year term. So we have 3 classes of 11. We have 2 at-large seats. We have 1 seat specifically designated for each division of our courts. So we've got 1 appellate attorney, 1 civil attorney, 1 criminal, 1 family, and 1 for elder, probate, and trust. Then we have 3 diverse attorney seats for race and LGBTQ. And we also have 1 set aside for a young lawyer division. So 11 attorneys are elected each year, and then we just proceed through. So you're eligible to be vice chair in your 2nd year and eligible for chair in your 3rd year. So we don't have any lay persons. We are elected by our peers through the Bar Association. And you can run for either an at-large seat or one of the designated seats, however you want to apply. And then again, once you're on, you serve for 3 years. And our purpose too is to provide ratings after an evaluation by our committee for the general public to review and use that to compare our candidates. So we evaluate attorneys running for judge, and if typically when judges who are running for retention, they will typically just have a campaign that is run through the Bar Association, so they don't usually come and sit for an evaluation for retention. If they decide that they want to run their own retention campaign, then they can come before us. We also handle any appellate court judges who are running for a statewide seat if they are based in Allegheny County.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mark, could you
Yeah,
discuss the Philly Bar?
sure. Thank you, Debbie. Well, first, I'm a partner in Weir LLP. I do commercial litigation in my spare time. I joke about that. And appellate and ADR, commercial mediation arbitration. So this commission in Philadelphia, I think, has a particularly big challenge because in the past, prior to the commission being set up, long lists of candidates would appear on the ballot and voters would just throw up their hands and not know what to do. They would more frequently than not vote based on ballot position. So if on a list of 25 names, they were asked to pick 10, they would just tick off the top 10 on the ballot. And we saw that just by virtue of the number of votes that those candidates got. So our commission really has its work cut out for it. And with that in mind, we have a larger commission than either of the other 2 that you heard about. We have 36 members, including not only our chancellor, chancellor-elect, and vice chancellor, but also a representative of the DA's office or the DA, him or herself, the public defender, the city solicitor, various other constituencies from what we call affinity bars, the Barristers Association, which is primarily African-American attorneys, the South Asian Bar, the Hispanic Bar Association, etc. Each have a representative. They serve typically under our bylaws for a 2-year term, but really those are primarily ex officio positions. So they can be much longer. If the DA is in office for many years, then that will continue to be our DA. Likewise with the public defender, et cetera. We have 4 appointed members, and we have who are attorneys, and 4 appointed members who are lay people. We very much want to include lay people in each aspect of our process. In addition, we have an investigative division of 120 people who divide up into groups of 5 for their investigations. And I think, Debbie, you probably want to go into that in greater detail later. But I just wanted everyone to know that there is a layperson on each of those investigative teams so that the public at large has a voice in every step of this process. It's completely nonpartisan. In contrast to the Pennsylvania Bar Association that has a Democratic seat and a Republican seat, for example, we deal completely without reference to a partisan affiliation, just in picking the most representative members of our commission across constituencies and also particular section leaders, committee leaders, etc.
You mentioned ballot position. Does anybody want to explain how ballot position occurs on the ballot?
I'm happy
Mark?
to.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in Philadelphia, I believe those positions are drawn.
Out of
and-
a hat. Out of
Yeah.
a hat.
Exactly.
Brought out of a hat.
Yeah, it's some traditions just never die,
Right.
and that's not a particularly good one.
So when you see number one on the ballot, it doesn't mean they're number one in qualification. It's out of a hat, so everybody knows.
And that's why we try as a commission to direct people's attention to particular names. So we're not saying you should vote for person A, B, and C, persons A, B, and C. There may be a larger universe of qualified candidates that we identify than the number of candidates that the voter has to choose. We have no problem with that. We just want to make sure that those that the voters do choose are qualified. We take one further step though, and should I go into the different?
Yeah, I think you
ratings?
should go. Yeah, that was my next question, so go for it.
Sure. Okay. So we want to give particular recognition to those candidates who are of superior quality to be sure that they end up on the bench. And so we call those highly recommended candidates. And thus far, since we created that additional category, everyone that our commission has designated as highly recommended has then been elected to the bench, which we're very proud of.
And so I guess let's go into the detail for each of your commissions, right? If you want to, like, can we start? Why don't we begin with the beginning of the process? Like, how does it begin and what does each of the commissions do? So, Mark, since you were last, you want to start and discuss the Philly Bar Association and how this process, what the investigative process begins.
Sure. Well, first of all, it lasts several months. And in fact, in this particular election season, it began early last year in 2024 because we were evaluating candidates for potential appointment. The appointments were not ultimately made, but the governor had committed that he would not be appointing anyone that our commission did not find to be recommended, which was great. So then we already had a group of candidates ready to go. But in response to your particular question, Debbie, candidates are given a deadline to submit a questionnaire to the commission, a very detailed questionnaire that looks into not only contact information and employment background and things of that sort, but also highly regarded cases in which they've been involved, organizations in which they've been involved, because community involvement is one of the criteria that we evaluate, and many, many more items. So they fill out this questionnaire. There's a deadline for submitting the questionnaire. Then that gets submitted to the staff of the Bar Association. And then teams are set up to begin investigations based not only on the information in the questionnaire, but it's a wide-ranging investigation that requires that many sources be contacted, at least 20, at least 8 of whom need to be people that were not identified by the candidate. And again, I could go into further detail about the investigation, Debbie, or wait until the others.
I guess let's wait, but I guess my question for you is once they complete a questionnaire, is a completed questionnaire available on the Philadelphia Judicial Commission's website?
It is not. And it is purposefully not available because we want total candor from the candidates. And we don't want them to be intimidated by the idea that everything they put down will be public. Putting aside, of course, that even contact information now can be problematic when it's
Right.
open to public view, because then when these folks become judges, we don't want them to be harassed by those who are not deferential to the rule of law.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to discuss the Allegheny County Bar Association's Judicial Commission's investigative, I guess, the initial process?
Sure. I mean, for the most part, it starts out the same as Philadelphia's. Candidates have a questionnaire to fill out. It covers pretty much the exact same thing. It's their full background, their professional history, any other organizations they're involved with. We do ask for a writing sample as well, something they've written as part of their work. And they also have a deadline for which they have to submit their packet. And then we'll set up a meeting time. And in the meantime, we'll organize a subcommittee of 3 members of the Judiciary Committee to look into social media, talk to any references that the candidate submits to us. And then the subcommittee can also reach out to other members of the bar to find out if anyone's familiar with this candidate. We don't have set minimums of people that they have to speak with. It's just, can they get an idea of the candidate and their reputation in the community? And the committee will also sit down and do a pre-interview with the candidate as well, to raise any issues that have come up. We publicize who has submitted their ratings and who's about to be evaluated by our committee. So sometimes we do get members of the bar or community who email our committee with either praise or concerns. So sometimes that's ferreted out in that subcommittee interview, and then that subcommittee will come back to the full committee to give a report just before we interview that candidate.
So I'm curious, where is your publication, or how is your publication when you say you publicize that candidate has submitted a questionnaire?
It is through our Bar Association website, and I believe we also send out an email through the Bar Association giving the schedule of the interviews. Great,
thank you. And similarly, the questionnaire. I know the blank questionnaire is available on your website. Is the completed questionnaire available?
It is not.
No. Okay, great, thank you. And Chuck, tell us about the Pennsylvania Bar Association's
Thank you. Well,
process.
Similar to Philadelphia and Allegheny counties, the process does start with the candidate submitting an application with a detailed questionnaire. There are actually 3 different questionnaires depending on who is running and for what. So for open seats on the appellate courts, there is a candidate for judicial. There's an application or a questionnaire for judicial candidates. There's also one for lawyer candidates for those positions. And then there's a judicial retention candidate questionnaire, which is a shortened version. The deadlines for submission are typically the end of December. And then after that, the Pennsylvania judicial evaluation process consists of essentially 2 phases. The first is an appointment of an investigative panel, which is 3 members, 2 lawyers, 1 non-lawyer, assigned to each candidate. And they do a broad investigation that can sometimes last up to 2 months, where they would interview numerous individuals, not just those identified as references by the candidate, but numerous other individuals identified by the panel whom work with or otherwise might know or interact with the candidate. They obtain any available information from the disciplinary board of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as well as from the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board. They obtain and review numerous writings of the candidates, public record searches for things such as litigation, judgments, liens, among other things, and other searches about the candidate, including online or social media. Each investigative panel then sits down and interviews the candidate. And after that long process, they prepare a report for submission to the Judicial Evaluation Commission, and that triggers the second phase. The Judicial Evaluation Commission of the Pennsylvania Bar receives the report from the investigative panel, along with the candidate's questionnaire, other information, and voluminous materials gathered during the course of the investigation. The JEC reviews and considers all available information and materials. The JEC interviews the candidate themselves. The candidates are free to give an introductory statement, and then there's a long period of questions and answers, and then the candidates can give a closing statement if they choose. The JEC can seek additional investigation or information if they deem it's necessary. And there are 10 standards or criteria that we evaluate. In the interest of time, I don't know whether you want me to go through all of those 10 criteria or standards or not. I'm happy to do it briefly.
So I think you should, because we're going to go through, we're going to circle around again. So I think that's helpful in making and people understanding how you come to the decisions.
Sure. So the 10 standards or criteria for evaluation are legal ability, experience, that could include litigation, diversity of practice types, types of cases, longevity, things like that, character and integrity, financial responsibility, judicial temperament, sufficient mental and physical capacity to discharge their duties, community involvement, administrative ability, devotion to improving quality of justice, and sound judgment. So the Judicial Evaluation Commission ultimately issues ratings. There are primarily 3 ratings: highly recommended, recommended, or not recommended. Now, occasionally, if there's a candidate that chooses for whatever reason not to participate in the JEC process, they are given a rating of not recommended for failure to participate. If you'd like, I can describe or define what highly recommended, recommended, and not recommended are. That's up to you.
I mean, that's fine. That'd be great. But it's interesting. I was just going to ask you that question. So about what happens if somebody doesn't submit. So you've already answered that. So that would be, I think you should go into, because I think you're all similar, but why don't we discuss it?
So highly recommended, those ratings, when given out, are for candidates who possess the highest combination of legal ability, experience, integrity, and temperament, and would be capable of outstanding performance as a judge or justice of that court to which they are applying. Recommended is based on legal experience, integrity, and temperament. The candidate would be able to perform satisfactorily as a judge or justice of that court. And not recommended, it is based on legal experience, integrity, or temperament, or any combination thereof. At the present time, the candidate is inadequate to perform satisfactorily as a judge or justice of the court. And you notice the one difference is at the present time, we're not forever saying they're not recommended, but it's at that point in time when they're applying. In addition to issuing its rating, following robust deliberations, which remain confidential, the JEC prepares an explanatory paragraph setting forth its rationale supporting the rating. Now, before the JEC releases its rating and rationale paragraph, and before the JEC even announces who has submitted an application, the commission, through the chair, presents the rating and explanatory paragraph to the candidate confidentially. The candidate can ask questions. We won't go into the sanctity of the deliberations, but we can answer questions to the extent we're able. And they can seek reconsideration of their rating for cause shown. At the end of all this, the candidate has a right to withdraw from the race. If they choose to withdraw, it has the effect of avoiding publication of the rating and the rationale. So I haven't talked about retention candidates. I can if you'd like to now.
Not yet. Because I think there's a little difference between I know your process and the Philadelphia Bar Association. So Mark, would you share a little bit more about the Philly Bar Association's Judicial Commission?
Sure. Well, I'm going to jump around a bit because Chuck really did a very comprehensive presentation on all that the JEC does. So I will say, first of all, among the guidelines, the 10 guidelines or criteria that he listed, they pretty much track ours. I think ours maybe even come first, but I don't know the history well enough to say. In any event, at my instigation, this past year, we added an 11th criterion, which we call sensitivity to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That isn't a requirement that someone be from a diverse community. It is a requirement that they understand that Philadelphia is a city composed of many different ethnic, religious, and racial backgrounds, and any good judge needs to be able to understand what makes people tick, and their differences and strengths and weaknesses, and contextualize how they came to be in court. So I mean, I could go into greater detail about that, but then that would probably use up the hour. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that there was this additional criterion, which, you know, for those of you who are aware of what's happening with DEI nationally, this again doesn't have to do with the selection of someone from a particular ethnic, religious, or racial background. It's more about their mindset and ability to understand different groups. So in addition, what Chuck had said about all the different resources that the teams look to is similar to Philadelphia. We look at social media, we look at many writing samples, we track down dockets, we talk to both litigants and attorneys who have worked with or have been opposite the particular candidate, and really get a very clear three-dimensional view of who this candidate is.
I mean, you also talk to
warts and all.
judges
Exactly.
before whom the candidate has, you know, appeared. Your Honor, what do you think about that? Do you think that's an important part of this process?
Right.
Yeah.
And what we do also, just for the record, is if someone says something inflammatory or accusatory about a candidate, we go into greater detail by finding out others who may have been in the room when an episode allegedly happened, others who were involved in the same case where something that doesn't sound very good happened. And so we get multiple sides of the story in addition to asking the candidate for his or her own recollection of particular incidents and episodes. So again, there's lots more I can say, but as Chuck described, after the investigation is done, there is a report issued. The report is sent to all members of the commission. The commission meets by Zoom now. They used to meet in person, and meets with the candidate on a Zoom screen. This is after the team itself has met in person with the candidate to observe the candidate's work environment and get more of a greater sense in person of the candidate's work life. But we meet by Zoom. The candidate makes a presentation. We ask questions through the chair that are posed by all members of the commission.
So the candidate's not on a firing block,
Exactly.
being asked by 36 members.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the candidate is asked to exit the room. We ask the team leader who has made a presentation to us whether that candidate's presentation was consistent with what the team had observed. We may come up with follow-up questions, bring the candidate back onto the screen. Otherwise, we excuse the team leader and we deliberate and reach a vote. If there are 80% or more of those present in the commission who believe that the candidate should be highly recommended, then that highly recommended vote carries. If it's less than 80%, even if an overwhelming majority believe someone should be highly recommended, that's not sufficient. We really want that to be a badge of true honor. And I will tell you, some candidates get disappointed when they don't get highly recommended. Yeah. It's not a slight against them. It's just that there are some who just really stand out as superior that we want to elevate with that designation.
Okay. And so with respect to the not recommended, right? I know that Chuck discussed that. What does the Philadelphia Bar Association's Judicial Commission do?
Right. So if a majority of those voting vote not to recommend, or I should put it another way. If a majority votes to recommend, the candidate is recommended. If less than a majority does so, the candidate is not recommended. If the candidate nevertheless gets at least 25% of a recommended vote, then that candidate has an opportunity to appear once again. Unlike the Judicial Evaluation Commission of the PBA, we don't write our reasons for public dissemination. And in fact, we don't even share our reasoning with the candidate, except to say that if a candidate is not recommended, we identify those criteria that the candidate has failed to meet. That gives the candidate at least something to rely upon when he or she comes back for a reappearance, if the candidate qualifies for that reappearance, in order to address those criteria that were not satisfied. The other category of not recommended candidates are those who simply choose not to participate. So in that sense, it's similar to the PBA.
Okay, thank you. Brian, what's the Allegheny County's process and how does it differ?
Sure. Well, we do, so I talked about the subcommittee that does their investigation. Those investigations, those meetings, those interviews with the candidate can be done over the phone or over Zoom. However, the full committee meets in person with the candidate for the final evaluation. And we do let it be a firing squad. I mean, I try to
33 people as a firing. Wow, that's a challenge.
It's not always. It's hard to get all 33 to show up at once, but we do have, our quorum is 17.
Okay.
And so the candidate will come in and they'll be introduced by the main investigative subcommittee member. Then they're asked 2 specific questions from the chair that are standard that they get ahead of time. All candidates get the 2 standard questions ahead of time. So they address that. Then I open up the questioning to the committee. It's very respectful. They really aren't shouting back and forth, but we give the candidate time to answer the questions. It's hard because some attorneys who only deal in family law, some of those family law members of the Bar Association know what to ask. I got on as a criminal attorney. I just left the DA's office this year, but I knew what to ask for criminal judges. I don't know what to ask for family law judges. So it's why it's kind of nice to open it up for us to all members of the committee to ask. And it's nice to see them in person because you get to see who's prepared and who is coming in and maybe reading off notes, who has their cheat sheet of talking points that they want to hit. Because that is one of the things that we evaluate the judges for. I mean, we evaluate them on integrity, legality, diligence, and judicial temperament. And it's surprising to me how some candidates come in completely unprepared to talk about themselves, to talk about why they want to be a judge. If you're not willing to prepare for an interview, I mean, you're being interviewed for a job. And if you're not willing to prepare for the committee, that's something the committee takes into account. So like I said, we get the report from the subcommittee before we bring in the candidate. We bring the candidate in. We give them about 45 minutes to an hour of questions. And then they're able to say their piece, answer any questions, anything that's come up in our research that they can answer to. Then they're allowed to leave, and then we start our deliberations. And so at the end of the deliberations, we take a vote by secret ballot, and it's calculated by our Bar Association staff. And at the end of all of our meetings for the evening, they come in and let us know the tallies. So we do have highly recommended, recommended, and not recommended. Those are our 3 ratings. Highly recommended and not recommended require 2/3 majority of the vote. Otherwise, it will default.
So it's the same number, right? The same percent, right? Yeah.
It's the same percentage of the vote, and you can only vote if you show up to that meeting. So it's only the people who saw that candidate in person and participated in the interview who can vote. So we don't allow people to. We don't even run a joint in-person /Zoom. It is an in-person interview.
And then how do you communicate the decision to the candidates?
I call each candidate at the end of the meeting and let them know their rating. And, you know, I try to answer what I can, but a lot of their questions go right to our deliberations, and those are secret.
And then do you provide, I guess, an explanatory paragraph rationale, or you just provide the recommended, not recommended, highly recommended?
Yeah, just the recommendations. And then as we release the recommendations as well, we release the explanation of the ratings. So all the voters can see what highly recommended means, what recommended means, what not recommended means. And if somebody doesn't show up, they automatically get a not recommended.
Oh, so they may sometimes fill out a questionnaire and then not show up for an interview?
Correct.
Wow. Okay. Mark or Chuck, have you had that? I don't remember that issue.
No, we've never had a no-show. We have had people submit applications, then drop out of the race for whatever reason, but not when we have our in-person meeting after this process.
Mark, how about?
We have had candidates who announce at the meeting that they are not going to be running. So yes, and of course, I should also point out, you'll see the page on our website that has the ratings. Debbie, I think you already put the link in the chat, the judges.philadelphiabar.org page. That doesn't show all the folks we evaluated. If we evaluate someone, find them to be not recommended, we give them the opportunity to withdraw. And if they withdraw, then they will not be publicized as not having been recommended. So in fact, this year, as in many past years, we evaluated many other candidates, but the list has been whittled down only to those who either we recommended or highly recommended, or chose not to recommend, but who wanted to remain on the ballot as such. Much smaller universe than those that we evaluated.
So I did put in the chat so everybody knows the links to each of these bar associations, judicial commissions, websites, and ratings. It's also on Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts website. But we have we only had an hour, and we only have 3 chairs of judicial commissions, but other bar associations across the Commonwealth do have similar commissions, may do it a little differently. Some, so you know, actually survey the lawyers as opposed to like doing an investigation. Usually those are in smaller counties, I'll say. But you know, these are really thorough processes. I think it's interesting the small differences among the 3 of you. But you know, how do you each like publicize it? How do you go out and get people to understand the length of time that you spend and the seriousness with which you each, you know, approach this? Brian, I'm going to let you start.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the frustrating part is,
Right.
you know, it's our ratings are published. They're often published in the papers. The news sites cover our ratings when they come out, and that's about it. A few people ask what goes into those ratings, and you know, I've heard it compared to a popularity contest or whatever, and it's like we are spending time. We're reading their writing samples. We're talking to people that they've worked with, judges they've appeared before. and their peers. And we're approaching it to see, if I'm walk into this person's courtroom, am I going to be comfortable with them on the bench? and it's we take it very seriously, and it's hard to get that word out.
Yeah. Justice Greenspan, I mean, how, what do you think about the process that each of these bar association judicial commissions go through? It's having sat on the other side, I'll say.
Having been on the other side.
Yeah.
So I was very pleased with my commission experience, to say the least. But in any event, the commissions are very important, but this is still an elected process. That Mark said that I think you said all of the highly recommended have always been elected, at least at the time that you've been, I don't know.
No, all the way. I mean, we haven't had it for many, many years, but since it was added, it has been a ticket to the bench.
Yeah. Well, that's very, very encouraging. I don't know whether Chuck or Brian has had the same experience where if the person is highly recommended, they end up elected. That's a really marvelous.
And if I can just interject, Debbie, frankly, for the last 3 election cycles, only recommended judges have been elected to the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia. So we're very proud of that as well.
That's great. Chuck and Brian, do you know if the same has been attributed to your commissions of highly recommended that those candidates get elected?
I haven't tracked it like that, and so I can't say with certainty, but I can tell you there have been some cycles where we had more than one candidate be highly recommended for only one spot, and there's been other times where we haven't had a highly recommended. We thought that they were recommended, but we didn't give them that highest rating, so we haven't tracked that.
Yeah, I can't say that we've tracked it either. I know for a fact though that there have been highly recommended who haven't been elected, and there have been not recommended who have.
So, that's sort of a shame for both situations. Mark, I know the Philly Bar Association has actually gone out to the polls on, election day. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, we have a PAC, a political action committee, called the Campaign for Qualified Judges, and that is tasked specifically with the responsibility of getting the word out. In other words, the Judicial Commission's function is really to investigate and evaluate and get us to the point where there are ratings. It is up to the Campaign for Qualified Judges to get the word out. So it's contacting the media. It is standing at the polls, handing out our ratings, having community meetings, ward, trying to work our way into ward meetings, just talking to anyone and everyone we can, in addition, of course, to having those ratings posted. And the Philadelphia Inquirer and other media have been cooperative in posting our recommendations. I think the Philadelphia Citizen and other media have done so as well. So the word gets out in order to just deal with the fact that political endorsements are only one version of the message of who you should vote for. And often, as I said, there is a confluence of the two, where the endorsed candidate is also a recommended candidate. But we want to make sure that people know who is qualified and likewise who is not qualified. We don't shy away from that because we want people to know whom to avoid as well.
Let me just ask Mark, do you have an arrangement or with the city committee to only endorse recommended candidates? That was Is that what?
It depends on the election year. And of course, that makes it much easier at the publicity stage, because if people just decide that they only want to vote for those who are endorsed by the party, then they'll be all qualified candidates. There has not always been symmetry in that regard. And this year, there is some asymmetry, very little, but some. But overall, I think the political folks in Philadelphia have been deferential to our ratings, because they realize they don't want egg on their face. They don't want to be embarrassed by putting forth candidates who are not qualified to sit on the bench.
Thanks. Chuck, how does the Pennsylvania Bar Association get out the information and
I'd say
distribute it?
3 major prongs. One is press releases to the media throughout the state. A second is the Pennsylvania Bar Association publications. We're the largest statewide organization of lawyers, and not only does the publications go to all of our members, but they're in law libraries and things all over the state. And then the third prong is directly to the public through websites. So there's pavotesmart.org is one, and then the Pennsylvania Bar Association's website, pabar.org. And there's not only on those websites is there information about the ratings for that year and the rationale paragraphs, but we also have information about the process, so it's transparent, and we have a lot of other voter resources available to the general public.
Great, thank you. Brian, how about how do you publicize the findings?
Yeah, it's publicized through our news sites or news organizations, our website. That's pretty much how it's.
I think you're all missing one of the most important parts. The candidates actually publicize it too.
Well,
candidates want this sometimes, but many do want this little this label of that they went through this process. They've been highly recommended or recommended. I mean, I definitely have seen that on some candidates' websites.
absolutely.
That they do. And I've had numerous candidates tell me, and this is why we do our process as early as we can. We wanted to precede the party caucuses or things like that, because they've told us we need to have this recommendation prior to those meetings, those caucuses. So they do promote it, as much as they can, particularly those that are highly recommended.
All right. So we are almost out of time. So I don't know if there's anything else that each of you want to just say about the process and judicial elections. And I think who happened I started first with? Brian, why don't you start first?
I have a lot of things I'd like to say. No, I mean it's an odd process that we are electing judges in the way that we do, and I think because of all the different political endorsements, our ratings sometimes get lost, and it's a completely different evaluation system, and that's what's frustrating for my committee. I mean, we talked about it even in deliberations, how seriously we were taking these votes, and yet some people already have a leg up before they even come in the room. So it's a frustrating process for me.
Mark?
Same. But first, I'll point out there's a whole category that we didn't address on retention. Perhaps
we're going to come back. We're going to come back and do this.
Right. But yeah, I agree with Brian. I mean, one of the essential priorities of the Philadelphia Bar Association is to advance merit selection of judges. It's only because we don't have merit selection that the Bar Association feels this obligation to educate voters about those candidates who do have merit. And I don't think people realize quite how meaningful a judge's impact is on their lives, whether they're getting a divorce, whether there's a probate dispute, a traffic ticket, any number of things on a micro level, and on the macro level, we're seeing it in the headlines every single day now, where courts are deciding issues of public policy that affect our lives more broadly. So in some ways, that is what people should be most concerned about. They should focus on these judicial races because that will have a tremendous impact on them personally.
Thank you. Chuck?
I totally agree. And just to bring it full circle from something that you said very early on in this program, Debbie, is that so few people turn out for judicial elections. And I suspect it's because, one, a lot of folks don't appreciate how the judiciary and the justice system directly impact them in their lives every day. And two, they don't know a lot about the candidates. And I guess maybe they'd say, well, if I can't make an informed decision, I just won't vote. I speculate, but I think there's some truth and some merit to that. And that's why what we all do, I believe, is so important to help inform the general public about the justice system and the judiciary.
Thank you. Your Honor. Closing remarks.
Well, is absolute. These commissions are so critical, given that we do not have merit selection. This is the only way that we can try to get the best, candidates to be elected, and hopefully, it'll keep working well.
Right.
And
Okay.
because I don't think we're going to get merit selection.
I'm not going to give up on that. We'll see what
I don't
happens
know.
on that point.
Well,
But
I'm with you, Debbie, there.
okay. So, but I want to thank you all. And I also want to just emphasize again to everybody, a lot of the county bar associations do similar types of investigations, come up with recommendations. But these three bar associations really do an unbelievable job in thoroughness, fairness, unbiased reporting, unbiased investigation. So I want to thank you all for joining PMC in this program, and have a good night. Bye.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you,
Thank
Debbie.
you. Bye-bye.